Sound. I know you've traveled far and wide, all corners of the globe, and it's great to see everybody here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Alexander, and I am a long-time, about 20 years, member of Monkees backup band. So, I'm the keyboard guy. And I started back in 1995 playing in Davy's band, but I first met Davy in '93 when I was doing a play called The Real Brady Bunch. So you can imagine my surprise. The two favorite shows of mine when I was a little boy was The Brady Bunch, followed by The Monkees. And I used to cry and scream over The Monkees. They were my favorite all-time band. Until, well, I discovered the Beatles. No, but I still love the Monkees, obviously. But when I discovered the Beatles, I realized where the Monkees came from, and I thought they did a fantastic job. I never lost my love of the Monkees music. It just makes you happy, it makes you smile, it makes you dance, and that's what we're all here for, to have fun, smile, and dance. And so when Davy and I worked together, and I used to be the music director of this play called The Real Brady Bunch, where, right, you've seen, so they had all these adult actors come up and play the Brady Bunch live on stage. And then one day they said, we're gonna actually do the Davy Jones Marsha episode, but Davy's gonna come play himself. I nearly flipped my lid. So when we met, we started a relationship in '93 because our common love of the music of the Beatles, go figure. So we'd hang out in the back of the bus and hotel rooms singing Beatles music all the time. It was just great. And 1995 came and he called me and asked me to join his solo band. And ever since then, I've been with different inceptions of the Monkees, Mickey, Davy, Mickey, Mike, Davy, Mickey, Peter, and Davy. And the last 2 years with Peter, Mike, and Mickey. So it's just been a great road, and we all hope to see you all again, continuing from this day onward at any of our shows. So I'm here to say hello, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm not going to give you the official welcome, but what I would like to do is introduce you to your gracious hostesses. Yes, these two ladies are just something else. They're phenomenal. They took just a fun idea and they made it their reality. So everything that you experience for the next 3 days is all due in part to these wonderful ladies who I'm so privileged and happy to now call my friends. It's one big monkey happy family we all have here. So always remember that. Always love one another. Nobody's better than anybody. We're all here the same, you know? So, you know, don't diss anybody, don't, you know? Just love everybody. It's easy, you know? So, right now, I would like to introduce to you your beautiful, gracious hostesses. And she's telling you, 1 minute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Miss Jody Ritson and Phyllis Paganucci. Phyllis is a little shy, so she doesn't say much. Don't bother.
That's great, right? Hi, everybody. We did it, right? I don't have eyes for fame because those lights are terrible. We just want to take a minute to thank everybody who has helped, has participated in this project, especially our families, because they've listened about this now 2 years. They've been hearing about the Monkees, and you know, they said that we couldn't do it by getting Nez here, but apparently they were wrong, right?
Just want to thank you all for coming, and we're in for a great monkey weekend.
Yeah, this is
so
nothing.
happy and proud to have Nez here with us, and we know you're going to be just as happy.
So this is what we're going to do. First, what we would like to do, we're going to have our Q&A with Pop and Nez. Did you all send your questions over? Yeah? All right, good. All right. So during the weekend, we're going to be doing some raffles for charity. All of the Dolans and Nesmith kids, everybody is trying to help raise money for various charities. So please, think about that when you make your purchases. But I don't really think you want to hear about what we have to say right now. We just get these outfits picked out for like weeks now, and this is what we're doing. All right, so what we'd like to do now is introduce to you two very important people that have come to be a part of our program. We have Miss Rachel Rosenfeld and Rob Horning. They're co-editors of the New Inquiry magazine, and we'd like to bring them out. It's a magazine that has to do with culture and criticism. So please welcome Rachel and Rob to the stage.
Should I have this, or should we sit down?
Yeah, you can sit down.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So before we bring on Nez, first of all, I want to say thank you all for sending your questions. We went over them collaboratively with Nez, picked out some of the ones that were the most consistent that you all asked. But first, before we get into them, I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're here. Can you hear me? Is this right? Okay. So Rob and I worked together on a magazine called The New Inquiry, and when we first met, I was starting it, and I was a big fan of Rob's. He had a blog that I read and really admired, and I came out to meet him, and one of the first things that we realized we had in common is that we were big Monkees fans, and in particular big Mike Nesmith fans. And that was sort of an initial bonding that we had between the two of us. And then, we got together, we built the magazine about 2.5 years later. I was on Nez's Facebook page, and he was responding to the Monkees of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or the question around that. And I was reading, it was this long, he writes these long posts. I was reading it through, I really engaged and interested in this topic. And then about 2/3 of the way down, there's a parenthetical statement that says, oh, but I'm not a critical thinker. If you're interested in criticism, you should be reading The New Inquiry. And it was just like, that's me. Like, it was just like this, and so I call Rob hyperventilating and crying, like,
Like, how can this be? How can
There's
some trick that he inserted it into the Facebook somehow.
Exactly. And Rob at the time was at this big conference, and he was like, we were both panicking, and and I posted on my Facebook, oh my God, Mike Nesmith reads The New Inquiry. And I'm not sure exactly what the technology was behind this. I think Facebook had just, it has the thing where you can subscribe to someone's status updates. So I guess Nez was subscribed to my status updates, and I didn't know it. And he messages me and he says, well, this is a great coincidence, like what, we should meet sometime. And I have family in California, I know that's where he lives, and I was actually going to be there for the holidays, so, I said, yes, that would...
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, like very like.
Maybe I can fit that in.
Exactly, I think you could pencil it in, and then I went. I was staying in San Francisco, and I borrowed my sister's car without her knowledge. It was a Volkswagen to drive down to meet Nez, and I had not at that time understood. I guess I thought that the world would have informed me that diesel fuel meant something that I should know. So I just, I'm driving it down, it's low on gas, and I fill it with just regular gas. And I'm it's car starts like doing this like sort of as I'm sort of I get off the freeway and I'm driving to meet Nez for the very first time and I'm so nervous and I try to make everything perfect, but of course right when I drive up to his office at Video Ranch, my car's like and then it just stops. So I walk in and I meet him for the very first time, and the first thing I have to ask my pop idol to do is call a tow truck and take me to the car dealership, where I'm informed that I've totaled my sister's car, it's beyond repair. And there's no way for, they didn't know exactly yet. So Nez was very gracious, he let me stay in the guest house. And I just think I blew it. I'll wrap up the story basically. Turns out that model of that car for another reason had been revoked. And so actually I came home with a brand new car for my sister. But Nez, to his great credit, and I think to, the spirit of everything he represents to me, the fact that I didn't seem to really care that much that I ruined my sister's car. When I was with him, I was just like, whatever, there's no turning back now.
That happened.
It happened. He thought that seemed like great leadership on my part. And then since then, he has supported the New Inquiry through the Guion Foundation, which is really our only form of outside support, and we've been collaborating on New Inquiry's growth and the Guion Foundation's growth ever since. So that's a brief introduction.
Briefly why we're here.
That's briefly why we're here. And so, I think without further ado, we're happy to welcome Mike Nesmith to the stage.
Okay, so what do you want to know? No, I'm glad to be here, and thank you guys so much for coming. I found out about the New Inquiry because I read one of Rob's pieces, and I read it and I thought, oh, this is a wise man. He's talking about things I think, and I want to follow him in, so I followed him into Rachel and followed him in. So I'm glad they're here because what happened when Jody said, let's do Q&A, she talked about, guys coming forward to the microphone, and I thought, I don't know how that's going to work so well. It'd be better if it kind of do it in an interview format. And I didn't know who to get to interview it. And of course, Andrew Sandoval was sort of the first choice, but then he was with Bobby Hort. And I thought, well, what can I do? I thought, well, Rachel and Rob, they're Monkees fans. So I asked them to do it. And here they are. And we got the questions in the email that people have sent over time, and Rob and I and Rachel curated it all. So we're not going to get to all your questions. How's that sound? We'll start with that, and then we'll go on to the fact that. But we did sweep them together so that we could give answers to some broader questions. And I'm going to let Rob and Rachel lead it, but I'm going to ask them some questions too, because aside from being two of the smartest people I know, they're also totally dialed, avid Monkees fans. And so they don't know a lot of minutia, but they know a lot of stuff. And so we'll figure this out. So you got some questions there, I think, don't you, Rach?
Yeah, so I have here on my phone some of the questions that we all selected that were more representative of what everybody asked. And again, I want to thank everybody who submitted questions and to let you know that every question was read. And we wish we had time to address all of them. I'll start with, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Aaliyah Wilson asked the question, what do you think about having teenager fans again?
Teenager?
Fans, Monkees fans.
Oh. One came. There she is. Well, I don't really think much about the age of fans. I think more about the heart and more about who you are, and the way that we connect. And you know, there's some lame-o teenagers, just like lame-o adults, but there are also some just beautifully smart and focused. And the thing that appeals, it seems to me, about the fans that I know is that everybody's pretty much on the same page about the Monkees. They all have this moment, this gem that they polish off that has to do with this moment in childhood, like you guys both have told me. And it's no different for a teenager than it is for, you know, us old guys. It's that same extraordinary moment where you look at the television and it's coming off you and you think, is that possible? Could I do that? Can I be that? Could I be a part of that? And it's ageless. So it doesn't have anything to do with it. I don't care about how old somebody is. I mean, look, if you're 306, you should probably go, you know, explain to me how you did that. And if you're 4, then, you know, come and sit on my lap, we'll talk, do what it is. But anything in between is just all, you know, sweetness and light in my estimation. What else we got?
All right. Deborah Estes asks, my question is, if you did not end up doing music and getting involved with the Monkees TV show, what do you think you would have done instead? Was there a plan B?
No, I never planned on getting involved with the show. I didn't, it was not a plan at all. I fell backwards into the whole thing, as most of you know. I mean, I started off performing, and then I started playing guitar and singing and around, and I ended up getting the job on the show, and but it always seemed right. It never felt like I would have ever done anything different.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you? Is that you in the red?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Is that a good answer?
Yes.
Okay, I see you recorded it on your iPad. I expect to see that on YouTube. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, I've given myself a challenging name. If you're here, please correct me. Jerry Thomasewski? Thomasewski?
Oh, you're here. Hey. Hi, Jerry.
It's a simple question, but one we're all curious about. What music do you listen to these days?
Well, it's sort of the same music I've always listened to, which is it's eclectic. It's as broad as it is long. I listen to anything that stirs me, anything that gives me an uplift. I tend to not brood. I tend to not be dark. I tend to not enjoy somber or, you know, those 99 songs that are the most relaxing songs that you can get from Amazon for like $1.50. You know what I'm talking about? Well, anyway, there's just, you can go on Amazon, it's a 90 world's most relaxing songs, 99 most relaxing songs, $1.50, it's an MP3 download. Well, they're Gregorian chants. Nothing relaxing. So I don't tend to do that. And I also don't tend to be manic, but I do love teen angst, which means I love, ZZ Top in the day and hard country blues and those blues singers. And who's doing that now? You know, there's some people who are just knocking it back today, still do the same thing. But I can't tell you who it is, just uplifting and brighten my day. I dance around the kitchen in my underwear. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that. You wouldn't if you saw it, but I'm glad you appreciate it.
All right, Tony Catania asks, so why now? Why after all this time have you come full circle and embraced the Monkees again?
Well, I haven't come full circle because I never didn't embrace them. I was always, but as most of you probably know if you followed it, early, you know, like 1969, the paths diverged. The show came to a stop, Peter quit, and we all sort of, well, what are we going to do now? And Mickey and Peter and I thought, we'll go out with an R&B band. I was like, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And so I did a little bit of that with them. But then what I wanted to do was get my country stuff and the songs that I was writing. There wasn't any real place for my songs in the Monkees, and so they didn't get recorded. You guys know 2 or 3 of them, but you don't know. I have a body of work that's half a century long, and so I wanted to play that. So I did the first national bands, and then from there it rolled out into more and more stuff. But never did my love for the Monkees and love for Mickey and Peter and David diminish. I mean, it was fun. It was great. I had it as part of my life. And it wasn't, I went out with the guys 2 or 3 times because they had a very active career performing as the Monkees. But I was busy too. I was making movies and doing stuff that we just constantly had schedule conflicts. And then towards the end, just before Davey died, I got, we started talking again. Let's go back out. And then, of course, we lost Davey. And then, so Mickey and Peter and I thought, well, we should probably do this now and really get out there. Who knows where this is going. And I said, yeah, I'm down for that. So that's how it started. And then just at the same time, I got this call from people in London that said, will you come over and play some dates? I said, sure. So my solo career started up at the same time, and it was just a kind of a logic of events, just natural. But it was never a lapse in my affection and my love of the Monkees and where it fits in my life. It was always the same, and it still is. I mean, I feel exactly the way about it now that I felt about it then, which is to say ambivalent. No, that's a joke. No, I appreciate it. Never left it. There you go. Take it to the bank.
Okay. I'm really curious about this one myself. It's submitted from Suzanne Perdue. It's a 2-part question, but related. What is your favorite Monkees episode, and what was the most fun one to film?
They're both the same as both the Princess, the fairy tales. Well, there was a couple of reasons for it. There was an absurdism that set in with the Monkees shows. And there was nobody who really just designed those things. They just sort of happened. And the fairy tale it depended a lot on some extemporaneous and spontaneous kind of riffing between the 4 of us, which we always had fun doing. And I realized, I could play this thing in drag. That would be fun. I could go into this girl and become the princess. It was a complete problem, and I just thought, I can't pass this up. And also the fact that I fell in love with myself. So that was fun. And then the way it came out, it was just good. It was absurdist, and it was a good comic riff. I didn't think it was the best Monkees episode, but in terms of what was my favorite, that was it.
I think, looking over the questions, I think they're all a little broader and deeper and things that we're going to be touching on in the Q&A. So maybe
Yeah, but I got some questions I got to ask you guys. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? No, seriously. Because tell me the moment that you became a fan of the Monkees. I mean, both of you are very astute. Both of you are highly skilled critical thinkers. And you're not going to, well, I'm assuming here, but I have never seen you or known you two or seen in any of your writings that you just wander along with the crowd. You don't tend to get swept up in fandom. I mean, I know you get excited about stuff, but I never see it in the magazine. It's so clear-eyed and so even-handed. So how did you get caught up in them? Not caught up, that's the wrong word. What brought you to the Monkees? What brought you to the Monkees? You go first, Rob.
Oh, me?
Go, yeah.
All right, I was gonna bounce that to Rachel, but yeah, I guess like you talk about not being swept along with the crowd. I feel like I was kind of swept along with the crowd. I had this idea that the Monkees were like, oh, they're like an imitation Beatles or whatever. They're not a real band, and like I sort of like didn't really listen to it as growing up as a little kid and didn't have much exposure to it as a really young kid. And then when I did, I had it in my mind that like, oh, this is like forbidden material in some way. It's like somehow occulted by this like sense that it's somehow like a thing that like was like I've heard like negative things about it. I've heard like skepticism about it. And then
Yeah, you don't, yeah, right, yeah.
and then I just loved it. I mean, I just couldn't understand how like what I was seeing and what I was hearing, you know, lined up with the stuff that I had heard and read about in like magazines or whatever. Just kind of absorbed from like being someone who's into music as a young kid and wanting to read about like, you know, reading Rolling Stone or wherever I was going to read things about music, just catch as catch can. So I had this sense that like, wait, this is something that like is not about that. It's not like they're like where I thought I was like being somehow smart by kind of accepting this opinion that I didn't really have any basis for. All of a sudden I had an opportunity to reverse that and have like just a different opinion about things and kind of like trust the opinion that I was feeling responding to the music and responding to the show. And then that's sort of like what got me started. And then it sort of like had its moment where it kind of came back onto television. It was on MTV, and I was like really into MTV as a music kid. And then I was like, oh, yes, this is like now people are starting to legitimate an opinion that I had that was private and that was my kind of thing. And I felt like kind of redeemed in a way, and then that sort of like accelerated the sort of fandom for me.
Huh. Cool.
For me, it was, I have two older brothers. They're quite a bit older than me. I actually don't know exactly how much. I'm not going to do the math live on stage. They were out of the military when I was 6, so that's the age difference. And one of them, they were both, I would say they're both snobs. They grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They were both like the coolest guys. They knew about everything. One of them in particular was in a lot of, you know, locally cool punk bands. And they just were encyclopedic about their knowledge of music, and to this day there's nobody I respect the taste of more. And their favorite band, they both agree, is the Monkees. And I grew up, you know, they would, I was this fat little kid and they would pick me up from school, take me to the donut shop and hold a donut over my head while I would, you know, I'd have to jump. And they'd say, like, their test for me when I was really little and they were trying to teach me about what matters in the world is name all of the Monkees in order of importance. And I mean, like, you know, I might get crucified out here later, but you know, whatever. This is what I was indoctrinated with. It was Nez, Torg, Dolenz, Jones, and I had to, and we just like that was like automatic to answer. And then later in life, I think a lot of it was about I was trying to understand my brothers. I was like, I really wanted to be close to them and know. I mean, I grew up with the music and I loved it, but then in college, you know, I took a course in feminist avant-garde cinema, and I wrote my final paper about Head, and I began to theorize.
Wow.
I began to theorize the Monkees and think about, you know, like what about the Monkees is symbolically important to me, and like what the spirit of it is, the adversarial spirit, the sort of siding with the children over adults, sort of at every turn, and never ending in that quest. That's something that I identify with deeply, and I think that it makes a lot of sense now looking back that, you know, Rob and I would have met and connected, and then Nez and New Inquiry would have connected, because there's very much a spirit, an ethic of the Monkees that I believe in quite ardently, actually beyond fandom and into something much deeper.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, wait, before down on this thing, you said you just tossed off the fact that you wrote your thesis on the Head, didn't you? Now, help us, because nobody in this room besides you obviously understands Head. We all think. So lead us, Rachel. Lead us. Tell us what the hell.
What do you say? We rewatched Head before coming out here, and I was trying to find it, you know, and I was like, what did I say? You know, and we had all these. I mean, I think that, like, you know, our takeaway from it was, on some level, it's about the film is about agency. It's about the, like, sort of impossibility of freedom, and that, not just for the Monkees, but for all people. At the time, I wrote about how what I had learned about feminist avant-garde filmmaking tactics of sort of, I mean, I'm not going to ramble on forever, but about, it's about the male gaze and sort of thwarting it and subverting it. And I think what's interesting about the Monkees is that in that film, a lot of the tactics that's typical of avant-garde filmmakers from a feminist perspective was employed in the Monkees to thwart the gaze of the original Monkees fans. It was about complicating and subverting the Monkees fan gaze and sort of like possibly setting out in, kind of cleaning the palette for something new, but then of course it ends in the black box. So it's a very readable film. It's a very complicated film. It's sort of, it's both, it's upsetting, but it's also, it's compulsively watchable.
It is watchable, I have to say that. I can't take my eyes off of Davy.
I'm curious, Nez, what do you think about Head?
Well, I was I'm sincere in that I don't really quite understand, but you see, I was swept on in something. Everybody in this room has to understand that I never saw the Monkees. I have no idea what it would be like to be a Monkees fan or part. I just don't know. Any more than Jimi Hendrix ever saw Jimi Hendrix live. I did, and I knew more than he did about that experience. But if I think about Head, and I think about the Monkees in, and this, I wanted to ask you about this, I need some water, was in today's internet environment, in the media environment, is there anything like this that's going on? Or is this thing going to transfer forward? What is the dynamic? Because what you're talking about in Head, oh, thanks, thank you, sir. There was something in that movie that you position academically and correctly, I agree with it, but there's something in it that's very heartfelt that was in the show. And is there anything like that in contemporary media, in the internet, in what do I call it, today? I mean, is there anything like that that's a bookend to it, or uses the same dynamic that was there?
Well, I mean, I think of it in the most broad sense that, like, sort of the dilemma of, the Monkees in Head. They're kind of scripted into this situation that they're trying to break the script constantly, and they're like tearing down the sets, and they're kind of going off script and kind of talking to the cameraman. They're trying to break the fourth wall of this thing that they're in to kind of demonstrate that we're free people, we can make our own choices. But then the film swallows them up again, and they're still back in the scripted reality. And I feel like living in a world where it's sort of like we're under surveillance but in lots of different ways, by our own choices, by using our phones and by being on social media and using Facebook and all those things, like we're kind of like falling down the path towards sort of, being in that situation ourselves as a society where like we kind of like try to reenact our free will, but then we reinscribe ourselves within Facebook or within social media, and we're just like, oh, we're trapped in this thing, and like people are telling us who we are. We don't get to say who we are to them.
Well, but are the Monkees, so the Monkees represented a sort of freedom from that? Because that's the word you used, Rachel.
Yeah, well, I think that it's about the sort of, my interpretation is that it's about the sort of the gestures toward freedom and the foreclosures of freedom, and that the Monkees was never, the Monkees is that film and the Monkees in general is a much more sophisticated document than I think it's ever been fully recognized by, mainstream critics and by the mainstream at large. So I think that, I agree with Rob that in some ways the Monkees are more relevant than ever. In a sense, there's, I don't, and to answer your question in terms of there being a thing like the Monkees that isn't all of us, right? That isn't all people in society. I don't think there is, because I think what one of the things that's so engaging and interesting about the Monkees is that it was the first time that this kind of collapse of identity and collapse of media took place in one space, and that space was the Monkees. On some level, it was like, oh, four insane boys, try out for this thing, and you couldn't have known that what was about to happen was, that identity could be sort of, you would have your celebrity identity be mistaken for the characters you play, the television show and the music, sort of having these tensions between the two. I think it's a bottomless depth of analysis that we could give, and I want to know, one question I have, and one thing that I've always thought about when I watch the Monkees, is that I think it's a very critical show. And on one level, it's very, warm and friendly and, kid friendly, but it's also a very adversarial show. It's also a show that is against something.
Well, Robert Raffleson, said on several occasions, he said this on a commentary on some of the shows, that he thought it was sort of anti-capitalist. I think that was more Raffleson than it was anything else. The thing that I go back at, and because I was just a cog in this wheel, was how collaborative it all was, and how important the collaboration was. When we did the first shows, I remember that somebody said, "Oh, we didn't shoot enough footage," and our editor, Jerry Shepard, just sort of cut and pasted real quick because I had to deliver to the thing, and that from that was born the whole kind of crazy style of it. Now, it's true that Raffleson had gone, after Richard Lester's dynamic in Hard Day's Night. That was an homage. The Monkees' whole thing was an homage to that. But still, there was this moment where it just sort of came out of nowhere, and it was. If we tried to go back and figure out, okay, is this point of view an adversarial point of view? Is this a feminist point of view? Is this what are these guys up to? The answer was, beats me. And yet, on the wall was, did you show me the picture at dinner last night about money is the root of all evil?
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
One of the first shots in the show.
It is one of the first shots in the show?
Yeah.
Well, you guys never told me that. I can't remember what was on that set. We tried to rebuild that set when we did the special in '97, but we couldn't find all the pieces. They were all gone. Anyway, blah, 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 blah.
I'm curious about the sort of behind the scenes also, just in terms of, building upon this. Maybe there wasn't a set ideological agenda of the Monkees to be subversive or adversarial in this way, and yet on the same Raffleson commentary that you're referring to, he talks about how one of the strategies the Monkees used was always to use first-time directors, because first-time directors had no sense of rules, and so they could just do